A blade, once freed from spectacle, remembers that its first profession is quiet.
Entry 8. Brass on brick, rain on lie. 1869 to 1870. Phase 2. Method and mask. Foreword. My name is Edwin March. This is my diary, never intended for other eyes, never meant for any stranger to read along with the measure of my breath. And yet it lies here now, dusty and misplaced, amongst the forbidden shelves of Grimwick's library. You will know me, perhaps, by another name, one the press bestowed with ink still wet from panic, when the penny papers chanted until it became a jest and then a judgment. Jack the Ripper. I neither claimed it nor refused it. Names are currency. The public trades when they lack geometry to comprehend what was only ever method. Let them have their theatre. I keep my ledger. Observational. Today, I write of a morning of brass and brick, of kitchen work that smells of lie, of errands run in a physician's name, and of a yard that accepted a decision. Each page lays bare another piece of what I have become, or never was otherwise. Since you now hold it in your hands, sit down. Listen. This diary does not live by pictures. It lives by rhythm and coldness, by words like blades, and by what they complete within your mind. 1. A market wakes to weather. Cold it was, and the morning, having mislaid the habit of kindness, put a thin plate of pewter over the stalls and bade the wind write the tally. Brass on brick, rain on lie. That is the arithmetic by which a kitchen lives. I went earlier than the butcher's jokes could learn their lines, and found the hooks making their dry clink, promising a commerce that would smell more of necessity than of appetite. One does not, if one is to be kept, walk through such a place as a purchaser alone. One must go as ledger and as broom, as eye and as silence. The stallman, knowing me now by my basket and my refusal to haggle, offered what could be offered, and the gutters, not having any say in the matter, accepted the overrun of offal the way a clerk accepts a late signature, without respect, but with a practiced hand. The house whose kitchen I served had lately lent a chair to a physician of reputation. By that slight furniture, it acquired a traffic of bottles and requests, and I, who had been merely useful, became necessary. To market, then, in a coat that kept rain out of sleeves and any indiscretion within. Observational. I took the seam of the lane that saves the leather of a boot, counted not faces but weights, and permitted the fog, priest of this parish, to lay its patient stole upon the scales. When one attends to weights, the world speaks plain. When one attends to faces, it lies. I bought salt fit to cure a week of vanity, bread that would not remember who tore it, and onions that promised to be honest in heat. A constable, who had not yet learned that morning work is the only decency the city expects, stood with his lamp at his hip and studied whether the stall should be his business. He decided, at last, that the business of the lamp was to be ornamental, and allowed me the width of one umbrella to pass. Weather, he observed. Trade, I returned. He approved, for weather may be argued with, but trade, in this quarter, is an article of belief. The dog at the sausage barrel rehearsed his offence at thieves, and forgot the line when I scratched a phrase behind his ear that only honest clerks know. So, with rain having signed its name to my sleeves, and brass having told brick what it thought of the hour, I made my reckonings and went home by the alley that prefers the smell of onions to the sound of scandal. It is a mercy in a city when an alley prefers anything at all. Many are agnostics and will take whatever doctrine the day brings. The kitchen would wake now, and the knives, if sharpened to sense and not to drama, would say their small prayers to the board. One keeps a house, not with recipes, but with intervals, with doors that close neither too soon nor too late, with an appetite for the ordinary that forgives the weather its mischief.
In a city that never sleeps, where every light hides a story, and every night whispers, "What if?" One man turns the impossible into your next experience. Mitchie Sander, the name behind Vegas's most exclusive nights. Private villas, secret shows, tables no one else can book. From the Strip to the sky, your access begins here. You don't wait in lines. You walk through velvet ropes. Because in Mitchie's world, the world waits for you. Discover the art of living at mitchiesander.com. Vegas, done the way it was meant to be.
2. On disguises fit for trade. If a man is to be believed when he speaks of soup, he must be unremarkable when he speaks of anything else. Kitchens teach this doctrine better than churches. Service requires an absence in the self that I have always found easy, being already less a person than a procedure. The cook took me on for the discipline of my hands, not a speed which betrays itself, but a refusal to trespass noise, and for my reparations after breakage, which are the true test of any servant's worth. I learned the etiquette of steam, the calendar of fat, the tact by which a pot is persuaded to cooperate without being courted. One might suppose that knives, having earned their keep in rougher markets, would be impatient of household tasks. It is not so. A blade, once freed from spectacle, remembers that its first profession is quiet. In the physician's orbit, which the house now entered by degrees, quiet became the currency by which errands were paid. There were requests at hours a gentleman would not choose, and bottles with labels that suited a scholar better than a stomach. There were letters that desired a quick answer, where the post, being a lazy creature, would grant none. The doctor, I shall not write his name. It belongs to a reputation, and reputations are as fragile in ink as they are stubborn in speech, took me for the usefulness of my absence. A butler must exist in such a way that a house, when asked to account for his passage, murmurs something polite and then changes the subject. Thus was I given the little ledger with its neat, unabrasive hand, the cupboard wherein the keys sat like sleep cured of dreams, the errands that led to apothecaries, who abide in rooms that smell of mortal caution, the permission, twice a week, to take a coat that does not declare its household. It is a mistake to dress a servant too well for the streets. The streets suspect generosity. I made my case, therefore, by sleeves that agree with weather and a gait that does not add to the pavement's memory. Where the kitchen ends and the city begins, there is a seam one may learn to walk until the eye cannot tell which cloth it is. Observational. When the physician condescended to dine with philanthropy, he required a messenger to those whom the evening's benevolence wished to remember. It is an odd thing that pity must be preceded by an announcement, or it will miss its object altogether. In this office I proved convenient. A man may knock where the doctor's name is a key, and the door, being already half persuaded, will swing the rest of the way on habit. Have I, by this function, taken advantage? I have taken the city's measure and offered nothing but exactitude in return. One keeps to edges. The middle keeps accounts. 3. The house that eats in silence. The house had a peculiar grace. It ate in silence. Not the nervous silence of a table where quarrels are salted and served, but the mechanical kind that belongs to a properly tuned clock. Footmen are metronomes when they have been taught. I, who came to the dining room by way of the scullery, found that the plates expected a certain tempo, and that the candles preferred to be corrected before they misbehaved. From the pantry to the hall and back again, I practiced the art by which a surface receives and forgets the weight of a tray. A servant's sole romance is with balance. He may keep that marriage secret without sin. Observational. The doctor had a hand that made no noise on linen. Even in friendliness, his touch argued for a different climate than the rest of us inhabit. He thanked me as one thanks a door that opens when asked. To hear him speak of bodies was to hear an engineer measure the wind. There was awe in it, which I do not despise, and there was none of the foolishness by which men flatter their fear. He had taken a house near enough to charity that gratitude could find him without a guide, and far enough from it that gratitude did not dirty the steps. Thus came evenings when I was sent with a parcel, or with an invitation that promised warmth and instruction. And thus came also the defenses of a household that attracts the sore and the curious with equal ease. The new bolt on the side entrance, the quiet word to Mrs. Grant, the housekeeper, concerning callers who prefer to arrive after the bell has ceased to mean anything. It is a slight craft to carry a room from appetite to contentment. It is a finer to carry it out again without evidence. The latter is a good apprenticeship for the streets. I learned the doors that give 2 breaths when one is in need of them, and the stairs that testify too easily to wait. The third riser, it is a proverb on my tongue now, listens as if it had been told a secret, and wanted to keep it. So I changed my preferences, and the stairs, who are great conservatives, decided not to argue. Kitchens do not forgive laziness. They also do not care for drama. I obeyed. There came, toward the end of that year, a supper for a small company from the hospital. A surgeon, with a temper that had murdered more conversation than any scandal could. A nurse, who repaired his manners as she might a mislaid instrument. And a clerk, who wished to be thought useful to science. In their presence, I discovered a language I had already been learning, without the benefit of books. A precision that does not despise metaphor, but uses it to cut. If one must have a scripture, let it be this: sharpness is a decision, coldness does not lie, silence seals it. The room ate, and the city, turning in its sleep in the street outside, ate too. 4. The housekeeper's keys. It is a poor house that does not keep a book of its keys. Ours kept 2, the honest one that recorded what the mistress might be shown, and the other, which was merely accurate. Mrs. Grant, whose memory has a better opinion of itself than the truth warrants, preferred to keep the first and to consult the second only when the first had been caught in a contradiction. From this arrangement derived a number of small comedies, which I enjoyed as one enjoys the innocent catastrophe of a dropped napkin, but it taught me too the city's lesson in miniature. Locks do not so much protect as they distribute permission, and permission is a rhythm. On Tuesdays, when the doctor gave his charity the benefit of his signature rather than his presence, there were errands whose geography would have offended a map maker. From the apothecary that smells of a fear that has been bottled for the hopeful, to the kitchen that smells of onions that have forgiven nobody. From a bell that rings for help, to a bell that rings for fashion. I kept the step that would neither flatter nor accuse. The housekeeper disliked my habit of carrying nothing in my face. It offended her confidence that a servant should be more mirror than glass. "You do not chatter," she said, as if this were a doctrine in need of correction. "No, ma'am," I replied, and in so doing finished the argument. Observational. Keys, when they have grown old in a lock, acquire a dialect. I learned, as one learns which friend will tolerate sarcasm, which door yielded with a laugh, and which demanded to be courted by the wrist. The side entrance, near the lane where the ragman accumulates history, gave 2 breaths late. The pantry door was petulant and enjoyed the exercise of being persuaded. The cellar, as cellars will, declined daylight as a matter of principle. Between these and my sleeve, the city conducted its rehearsal. I brought the doctor's parcels in and carried the city out. Each preferred this exchange to the other. There was a woman, one evening, who received the doctor's invitation with the irony of those who have been asked by kinder men and helped less. She stood at the threshold and let the word charity break upon her without changing shape. "Tell him," she said, "that I already own what he offers, and it has not been worth the keeping." She closed the door with the courtesy of one who has finished a dance and refuses the encore. I admired her precision and envied her refusal. There are doors a servant does not try twice. The city had decided the measure, and I bowed. 5. Livery in red streets. If there is a sin that clothes commit, it is to be remembered. In the red streets, where benevolence has turned its pockets out so many times that the lining shows, a good coat is an insult. I wore therefore that neutral garment which neither declares nor apologizes, and carried, when a declaration was required, the basket that says trade in a language even dogs respect. The physician, being committed to a theory of visibility that serves the newspaper better than the poor, would occasionally permit his crest to ride upon a button. I concealed the button as one conceals an indiscretion of a relative, by keeping it, with all kindness, out of the conversation. A reporter, who had the disagreeable habit of assuming that verbs belonged to him by right, asked whether the doctor's charity was not a theatre by other means. I admired the sentence and declined to lend it context. "The weather," I explained, "for weather is a sovereign subject. And the market," I added, "for markets are the church in which all districts kneel, whether they mean to or not." He wrote nothing, for a sentence without witness quickly becomes a suspicion without legs. The constable, whose lamp continued to argue optics with the fog, allowed my passage on the strength of my basket, which is a passport more reliable than a letter of introduction. I took to changing the angle of my hat where the alleys took to changing their morals. A dog, an honest clerk of an animal, went mute at a corner where he had previously considered it his duty to protest. I adjusted my schedule, A servant who keeps to time is an enemy to luck. Beneath an arch, a group rehearsed a quarrel with admirable discipline, stopping and starting in such a way as to permit a cautious man his passage. The city sometimes does you this courtesy. It is well to permit it grace in return. 2 streets farther, a window arranged its curtain to resemble a person of consequence. I prefaced my bow and found the curtain laughable. No harm came of it. Harm seldom announces itself with embroidery. Observational. The doctor, being more necessary than he was liked, took to having me carry certain notices to persons who had earlier professed an interest in his work. Notices are a delicate meat. Underdone, they are ridiculous. Overcooked, they are an offence. I kept them at a temperature the streets approved. When my route sketched the borders of those districts where charity is alone, no debtor needs, I folded the coat that bore his mark, and employed another that had nothing to confess. It is no betrayal to prefer safety to advertisement. Even newspapers become modest when rain persists. 6. The Yard's Ledger. Rain had begun again, and improved upon its earlier argument. The yard behind the tradesman's premises, whose door behaves as if it had been taught manners in a better house, maintained its custom of yielding the catch 2 breaths late. I will not pretend that I did not wait for that courtesy. One grows fond of punctualities that make no speeches. The drain, having been neglected by municipal affections, collected the day's mischief and spoke in a tone a man could keep time to without a metronome. Windows, if they had thought to observe, chose silence. A cat considered an intervention and decided on philosophy instead. 2 opportunities had already been refused. A quarrel that invited a crowd before it had earned one, and a stare that remembered its injury too loudly for a gentleman to be found upon it. The third presented itself without decorum, which is, in my experience, the only honest way the night offers anything. A figure attempted to move through the Yard's argument as if the centre were free. Centres are not free. They are jury-rigged dignities, and a sensible person does business at the margin. I attempted nothing, which is to say I accepted the Yard's terms, and the Yard, being fond of discretion, admitted a second of foreign time in which a geometry might be corrected. There issued at the proper moment a single, dull report, such as a stool makes when righted by a competent hand. The angles took it in, and kept no minutes. Iron began an anecdote, and water, which dislikes anecdotes, concluded it. A curtain thought to rouse, then thought better, having discovered that stories left unattended are less entertaining than their authors believed. I shall not say more of particulars. Particulars are advertisements, and I have never trusted a man who knows how to advertise misery. It is enough that the Yard, having given me 2 breaths on account, was paid in the currency it understands, brevity and correctness. Afterward, the drain resumed its counting, and the rain, which had never ceased its catechism, raised the question of tomorrow's weather with an insistence that excused all other topics. I rearranged nothing, for rearrangement is confession. I only occupied the margin I had already paid for, and then, having no more business there, departed as a clerk departs a desk at the proper hour. If there was a face, the light prefers not to testify. If there was a name, the stones prefer anonymity. The city likes to be asked as little as possible. If one follows this rule, it becomes, against its better principles, helpful. 7. Inventory in motion. One walks home differently when a Yard has closed its ledger. Not in triumph. Triumph is a howl and quickly spends itself, but with the calm of a shop that has found its till correct to the penny. I took the alley whose bricks know my step, not because I am sentimental about masonry, but because bricks, like old servants, prefer to continue a conversation rather than begin a new one. The constable, at a distance prescribed by the king's peace and by his own fondness for dry boots, observed a corner and allowed it to be lawful. The reporter mistook a carriage for a fact and wrote, I am sure, something that will give him a minute's pride and a year's remorse. Within the house, the kitchen produced the smell that forgives the world its inventions. Mrs. Grant, by some mechanism known only to housekeepers and angels, knew that I had not been where she would have had me be, and elected to dislike the news without prosecuting it. Keys lay as they should. The doctor's chair remembered the impression of a man who has sat so long to charity that he will never quite stand without it. I made the ordinary rounds. A candle rebuked for wasting tallow, A door encouraged to be humble. A window taught the difference between a draft and a decision. If there is a paradise for servants, it will be comprised entirely of rooms that have at last learned their lessons. As for rules, one must write them while one is still allowed ink. Rotate stores. No yard should be asked to know you. Trust water over bells. Bells make theatre. Water keeps time. Refuse souvenirs. Property is a proclamation and needs an audience. I require none. Maintain the coat that confesses nothing. Crests are temptations for men who have not found the courage to be uninteresting. The second within me, who has ceased to be a second and become instead the whole arithmetic of my breath, kept his figure. 3, 2, 1. I am, in this, content. Not the contentment of a man who believes himself righteous, for such men never forgive the world its variety, but the contentment of a ledger that, having balanced, closes without flourish. The city slept, or pretended to. She is a notorious hypocrite in matters of rest. Fog rehearsed its prayers on the lintels. The wind, honest clerk, wrote in the book of gutters what had been done and what had been deferred. If any soul should ask, souls are extravagant questioners, what was decided this night, I answer in the grammar that keeps me. Sharpness is a decision. Coldness does not lie. Silence seals it. Tomorrow I will go again to brass upon brick and rain upon lie, and the market, which is God's least offensive church, will teach me once more that weights cannot be flattered, and that onions, however cut, weep only for their own reasons.